It's been a long time. Like, a really, really long time. I think the last entry. I'm trying to also keep the sun out of the eyes. As you can tell, it's been a really long time. I look a little different, don't I? I think the last entry was probably like right when I got back from Mount Fuji, Japan. So, right at the beginning of the fall semester. And now I'm at the end. Whoa. It's crazy what time does. Yeah, and like finals are in a week and a half, basically like next week, because next week is Thanksgiving break. So I'm putting a timestamp on this. This is the week before Thanksgiving 2025, and oh my gosh, so much has happened and so much has been learned, and I can't wait to just wandering talks about it today because I don't even know where to begin. I think I could begin right where I'm at though, because that's typically how it's gone. So yeah, like I said, end of the semester. I've been in 2 classes, and I share that because they're very relevant to like this whole concept of talking about culture and anthropology and the lived human experience. The 2 classes I took was an intro to culture anthropology, as well as a course on international justice and humanitarianism. And that class was fascinating. I mean, like the way that we started to look at things that were once known to be like simple and easy understanding. Like, of course, everybody wants to say yes to humanitarian efforts, but a lot of times we don't, as people, and especially as like political citizens, don't really understand all the complexities and challenges that people in these organizations both navigate and face, and also that a lot of the results and a lot of the solutions that we put forth aren't really as effective as we truly think they are, or at least as they're broadcasted. And I think that's where I'd like to begin. The one thing that has been the most interesting and fascinating about the last couple of weeks is this understanding of, one, everything is a lot more complex, so you should slow down and get an understanding of all the factors in play and make local connections. And 2, narrative is everything. I mean, everything. It is the most powerful force on this planet, especially in today's times when we have things like social media and newspaper and television, all these forms of media that do what? They do one thing. They promote narrative. And narrative, as I have learned from these classes, is so it's truly a double-edged sword, because with narrative you can inspire, you can mobilize, you can act, you can also divide, you can also destroy, you can also incite violence and ruin with narrative. The way that facts and information can be presented in a particular manner, like it's mind-blowing. The reason I think about this is in my humanitarianism course, we had to write 2 essays over the course of the class, and one of my subjects was talking about anti-politics and the state of exception, which are 2 fascinating concepts that you should definitely look up. They relate a lot to intervention in geopolitical activities, but what I talked about in one of my stories or essays was how do these policies get enacted? They're not official policies, but like, how do these phenomena come about in the world? And it is through narrative. It's humanitarian organizations saying that we're not political, we're only here for human rights, even though they're financially backed by sovereign nations that typically want to have some sort of geopolitical foothold in a particular location. This aid doesn't come for free, even if it says it's coming for free. And that's how they do it. They say that it's not related to the state. They say that it's not related to this. They put it on a higher ground. They say that we're doing this because human beings deserve life. And they do. But that's how one of the ways that narrative can be framed. And then in the next essay, I talked about how in humanitarian interventions, two particular cases, one in China with recovering heroin addicts, how the Chinese state wanted to create this character called a good citizen. And they recognized that only through this humanitarian intervention that included recovery and aid instead of just like imprisoning drug addicts. It's a long story. Either way, what I came to conclude was that there are also characters that the state creates. And these characters play a very particular role in the narrative. These characters will promote change. They'll mobilize action. They'll make you feel sorrow, or they'll make you feel anger and justification. And they legitimize the narrative. It isn't just having a plot about we're trying to save lives. It's also having characters. It's also having a setting. It's also having a savior or a protagonist, as well as a victim or an enemy. When we use these terms that are like, they're rooted in story, they're rooted in military actions. Either way, whatever they're rooted in, we have to just keep wondering, who is telling the story? And what is this story supposed to do? And that's what I think is the most interesting thing that I've learned, is especially as a storyteller, as somebody who has written and now published 2 books, has performed poetry, has reconstructed worlds, narratives, lives, plots, deaths, transformation. All these things have existed in story. And when I was just reading these essays, when I was looking at these facts and this data and this history of various conflicts and natural disasters and humanitarian interventions across the world, something that came to be universally true was they all needed a story. It wasn't just the facts. It wasn't just this Lisbon earthquake took out this many people. It was the personal and intimate relaying of details about human suffering, about the individuals who were affected by it, how lives were changed, how cities were destroyed. All these things, these little tangible bits of, we'll just call it big capital D drama. It's not drama, it's true real living of life, but the way that it can be presented can be in a dramatized form, which is very effective when you are trying to gather support. Because a human being may not fully understand deeply researched facts, but they will understand a story about somebody feeling helpless. They will understand a story about feeling like somebody has come to take away their land, or they have to protect themselves, or they have to be the protector. And narrative is used everywhere. I mean, everywhere, not just in humanitarian interventions, but it's used in our advertisements. It's always a story about how this product can make you better. It's used in our medicine. It's about how this thing is going to transform your life. It's used in our politics. It's used in our relationships. It's always a story wanting to be told. I mean, especially in today's era where there's an even more emphasis on stories and storytelling in general, because now we all have one of these. So we can all be our own narrator, which sounds freaking amazing. And it is. And simultaneously, it's a slippery slope. Because how do I know I'm a good narrator? Am I giving misinformation? Because so much of a lot of the major international conflicts that we know about in today's times, there's so much misinformation that surrounds them. And yet, because the narrative is so strong, it's hard to separate, or it's hard to show what is misinformation and talk about it without people feeling like you're denying the whole story. For example, in our class, we talked about the Lord's Resistance Army in northern Uganda and Invisible Children and Joseph Kony, or Kony 2012, as a lot of us might have remembered it. It was a huge social media campaign about saving the children who had been abducted by this African warlord who was just truly an evil of evil men. And that was the narrative that we were all told. Truth is, the war had been over for 7 years when Kony 2012 and all that came out. Not only that, the children that were abducted, the term abduction itself is already like some level of controversy, because they weren't just sometimes, okay, I'll take that back. There were children who were snatched into the night. Like, there's no denying that there were genuine abductions that existed. There were also cases where the rebel combatants would just have somebody carry food maybe half a mile to their campsite and then release them. And that was also considered an abduction. But we never heard about this. You know, when we were here in America at the time on Twitter learning about this stuff, it just kept seeming like it was an entire army of abducted children. 12-year-olds with assault rifles and commanders who were no more than like 16 years old. And there were some of those. So I can't say that it's not inherently true, but it is not as it's not as exacerbated as the narrative made it seem. It wasn't a child's army. And funny enough, Joseph Kony was just doing what all the other previous African warlords before him did. The former president of Uganda, who he was like trying to overthrow, was also a military African warlord who overthrew the government. So you already have a history of overthrowing the government in their country. You have this this falsified data about child armies, and all of a sudden 10 years later we are donating thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to this cause that is no longer a cause. You see what I'm saying? You see that this narrative is wild, because again, I'm 2012, I'm probably 20 years old, and I'm on Twitter and I see this hashtag and this trending topic sitting up there, and the way that it's presented, again, thousands of children, child's army, we have to take this down, all this, wow. This is kind of cool. I like it. A little stormy action. Ooh, I feel like a video game. That means there's about to be a cutscene up here ahead, so I better get ready. Let me check my gear right quick. Also, shout out to Claire Obscure Expedition 33. That's just a really great game at this time in my life. And if we were to talk about narrative, oh my gosh, like, just, it just blows my mind how we can use literary elements in so many different contexts that are not just creative. That we can use the concept of plot and antagonist and protagonist to literally wage war with people across the world. And I think this is what scares me the most, is that because we are becoming a less literate society, because there is less focus on like narrative and what really constitutes like a story versus the truth, because that line is blurring over and over again, we are not going to be able to recognize when the narrative is being spun in front of us. especially when we have an age of like robots and artificial intelligence regurgitating what we're supposed to know. Who's fact checking the robots? That's a whole nother aside for another day. But again, it just makes me think, like, as we become less, as critical thinking starts to dissolve a little bit, slowly but surely, thanks to all the other advancements in the world, how are we going to know when we're exposed to the truth or not? How are we as humans going to recognize that this is a story versus this is real life? And what are we going to do when we recognize that that story is causing problems in our world? Because it sure is. And I mean, we see the rhetoric everywhere. In the United States alone, just the rhetorics that our president is using to describe immigrants, to describe working citizens, to describe family members and stuff. It all creates a perceived image of like something that is not true. But that narrative is enough to spurn people into action. The wrong action. Because it's the wrong narrative. Or maybe it's the right narrative for the wrong people. I don't know. And it's like, it goes back to like the problem of humans wanting to generalize and oversimplify everything without taking a deep breath and looking at the complex factors that make up a whole scheme or a whole setup. It really does frustrate me. Especially as a writer, like I mentioned. But I look at the personal tip is I look at my future now. I look at me wanting to get the degree in anthropology, me wanting to continue getting a deep knowledge and understanding of story and narrative and human history and human interaction. Looking and saying, is there a way that I could potentially work to deconstruct narrative? You know, if I have the means to construct a narrative, do I also have the means to break it down, to look at the various pieces and go, that's true, that's not, we should be mindful of what this says? I don't know. Because I think that we need fact checkers. And not just fact checkers. We need story checkers. We need those kind of things in here as well. Because again, all this world is dependent upon us having a particular feeling. The whole world needs it. That's how human beings act and survive. It's through story. It's through communicating our needs in a way that isn't just like, you know, again, facts and data. So how do we ensure that we can say yes to the right narrative? How can we ensure that when we're faced with a false narrative, that we can recognize it and then find a way to maybe like break it down or destroy it? Because if we don't, the narrative will always prevail. And what narrative does, it drives action. It drives people into action. So if we want to, you know, really get action going for ourselves, we do have to like break the narrative down. We do have to put a firm foot down and say, this is not the story we need to be telling. Instead, it's this. And we all, again, have the means to do that in our hands. So this is a challenge in itself. This is what I believe our generation will face in the realm of politics, especially in the realm of politics, is being mindful of the narrative and ensuring that we just slow down, look at all the layered pieces before we make a generalized and simplified statement. Because that statement will lead into generalized and simplified action. And if that solution doesn't match up and figure out and fix all the complexities, all we're going to do is make it worse. And that's not what we want. So this is the reminder to slow it down, take a look at everything that's around, do some critical thinking, and then when it's time, tell your story. Just make sure it's the right story.